I once recorded a podcast for someone else, and I was in a really, really hot room, and I just actually had to do it with no pants.
Oh my God, hilarious.
Because I was so hot. I just had to, and then
it's the benefit of top-up recording,
Yeah, exactly. And then she was like, "Oh, could I actually just get you to move? There's just something in the background. Could I actually just get you to move a little bit?" And I stood up and I was like, "Oh."
Don't look at my bottom. Okay.
Kia ora everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Untidy. I'm Hannah Davison. I'm mother of two. I'm the co-founder and author of the My Big Moments children's books, and I'm very, very excited today because we're recording in person.
In person. You might not be... Well, actually, if you're watching on the tube, that's what the cool people call YouTube, you will see that we are in the same room. And my name is Matilda Green. Today, we welcome back to the show a very popular guest who will continue to guide us on the next stage of our spiritual journey, Georgia Vavasour. Georgia, who has joined us twice before, actually, on the show, and we will put the links to those episodes in the show notes. Georgia is one of the most experienced Vedic meditation teachers worldwide. She also teaches applied consciousness techniques such as Himalayan breathwork, Kriya, and is now trained in Vedic astrology, or Jyotish. So today we're going to hear about what the exact details of our birth time can tell us, and she's going to reveal some interesting discoveries she's made from analysing our own charts. And we actually don't know what's coming. I'm equal parts excited and nervous. Georgia teaches Vedic meditation throughout New Zealand and in Byron Bay. She hosts international retreats, mentors clients globally, and continues to train annually with Vedic masters in India. So welcome back to Untidy, Georgia.
I'm so excited to be back. It's just such a fun podcast to record on. And I'm so excited to share a bit more about astrology with you both. Reveal some things about your chart, especially you, Matilda, because Hannah, I've done your chart long back. But Matilda is yet to hear anything about her chart.
And I don't know anything about it. Like, I really don't. Is it to do with star signs?
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. No,
right.
no.
We've got to start at the beginning.
we're gonna have to start at the
Roll it
beginning.
back.
She's so excited to get in. She's ignored the interview plan immediately, directly after the intro.
I've chucked my laptop out the window.
You're like, forget it. What do we need to know? And by the way, Matty, I just said to Georgia, I was like, hey, just say anything. Just reveal absolutely anything. And we can just, if it's too personal, we'll just cut it out later.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
What haven't we shared on this podcast
What haven't
already?
we shared on the pod?
Well, no.
Until now. Okay, so, all right.
Okay,
let's back
rein
up
it
track.
in.
Rein it in. All right, so since we last had you on the show, you've added another string to your bow and become a Jyotishi, or Vedic astrologer. So firstly, tell us what those terms mean and what did you have to do to learn?
Yeah, so Jyotish means the science of light. So it's really about illuminating the soul's pathway through lifetime, because we know that life isn't uniform. It's kind of this revelation. Oh, yeah, right. It's not just happy all the time, which is what we kind of think, growing up, that's what we're aiming for, is like one consistent level of happiness. And then we realize actually, there's periods where it feels like it's flowing really well and everything's kind of just sort of dropping in our lap. And there's other periods where it just feels like crunchy. And that's where obviously when it's flowing, you're not really asking any questions, just like, great, this is me, it's all me, and it's so great, it's going well. I'm killing it at life, And then when it starts getting crunchy, it's like, oh, what's going wrong? I'm doing something. What is it? Is the planets, So it's about understanding, the flow of energy throughout life. What are your kind of unique gifts and skills? Because we all have a set of gifts and abilities. We have areas where we, might not be able to tap into certain potentials as much. And so it's really understanding that kind of unique energetic signature. So, the reason that I kind of brought it in is that I've found it, profoundly useful in my own pathway in business. I use it for timing, kind of when I release things. And also just understanding my own life, because my life has taken a very different turn to kind of what the average life sort of, the way things are set up is like you're, supposed to do all of these things. And I've kind of had a big departure from that. But that's very clear kind of from my chart about what, and obviously it's becoming clearer and clearer as the path unfolds, what it's all about. But it's been useful, to understand that a lot of the kind of crunchy things that have shown up in my lifetime, from divorce to cancer, all of those things. And then, I talked about it with students and with clients, and people would go off and have readings, but also with people that I'm working with, either mentoring or through meditation, there's times where I've just felt like I'd be talking to them, I just get this intuitive pull that this is more of a planetary influence. Yes, we can work on things here, but if we don't address that underlying, causative energy, it's just going to keep playing out. And so sometimes I'll say, can I just, now that I have the tool, I'll be like, can I just pull up your, you okay if I pull up your chart and we'll have a little look? And it'll be exactly the energy that I know is going to mean that their meditations will be more unsettled for a period of time. For example, there's a particular energy that will cause that. So even just knowing that, because people are like, I've been meditating for this amount of time and I've still got some anxiety and my meditations are really, really busy. And there's reasons why that is, but for that person or the few people that I've, had that kind of intuitive call to check on, it's been every time that planetary energy. So it's there, and they need a different meditation still needs to be there, but they also need a different kind of remedy that, we've worked on certain things that's actually going to help them kind of harmonize and align with that energy and not have it play out at that level where it's causing, more of that, anxious energy or feeling ungrounded, for example. So it's just helped me to really refine working with clients, and even within Pocket Guru, which is my space where I, share conscious wisdom every day and have that dropping in WhatsApp. There've been a couple of questions that have come in, and I've just, the pull has just been like, I need to kind of look at the chart. And so I've asked them, and then it's been the exact placement that I could kind of see in my awareness that really I could have answered the question in one way, but it was really calling for something else. So, and the people, the particular question, you heard that one, Hannah, she had emailed me afterwards just going, this knowledge is life-changing, knowing this is just helping me. She had a lot of kind of doubts about her relationship all the time, kind of going back and forth, and it was causing a little bit of distress in the relationship because her partner she was sharing that with her partner, and her partner's obviously feeling a little bit unsettled as a result. And she was like, I just don't know why I keep everything's good, and for a period I feel like it's good, and then I'll kind of go back and forth. And for her, it was specifically about needing to balance her nervous system, and once that state is settled, there'll be less of the kind of back and forth. So the key is not to mentally understand the relationship and do pros and cons, but rather balance her state specifically as a result of what I could see in the chart. So those are kind of the things where I found it really useful as a tool. So I trained for, extensive period of time in India, and I still train. I'm going back for another level of training this year. So it's been a really beautiful evolution of things.
Oh, it's so exciting. And so I think, can we understand what the difference is between Vedic astrology and Western astrology? Like, say someone knows themselves as like a Taurus, like me, otherwise known as like the Labrador of the zodiac. What will they find from Vedic astrology that's different?
Quite a lot. So firstly, what the sign that you know yourself as, so people are like, I'm a Leo, I'm a Taurus, that's tends to be your sun sign. So in Vedic astrology, we put a lot more emphasis on the rising sign and the moon sign. The rising sign is really you as a person. It's kind of how you look, even your appearance, and how you show up in the world. And then the moon sign is how you experience the world on the inner plane. So your inner mind and emotions, and how you are on the inside, which is really, the mind and emotions is really how we experience the world. So that sign is very important because that's how we're experiencing most things. So that's quite fascinating. The sun is really what we have drive towards, and how we might sort of express on the external plane a little bit more. So it has tertiary importance unless it's placed also with one of those other two, or there's a concentration of planets there, and then it might take on a little bit more importance. So that, firstly, it's a lot deeper than just your sun sign, because this idea that all the Leos are the same, it's ridiculous.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because you can read a horoscope and be like, oh yeah, I guess, I must be that, or like if there's one thing that's obvious that you do,
yes,
relate to, and then the other stuff, it's like, oh, maybe that's the other Libras, or maybe that's the, it's
and it's very reductive,
Yes.
like what, 40 million people are all just this one. And so what Vedic astrology does, the other thing is that Vedic astrology, it's about 22.5 degrees different. So we use the sidereal system versus the tropical system. So at a certain point in time, Western astrology fixed the degrees. But what we find is if you take a star tracker out and look at the sky, the planets are in the constellations or in the signs which which Vedic astrology says that they're in. So it's a little bit different, which is also, you may find that even your sun sign shifts a little bit with that degree change. So someone I was talking to the other day was like, I'm having an identity crisis because I always thought I was a Cancer, but now I'm a Gemini, But when I talked to him about it, he's like, oh yeah, I am much more like this. But he has 2 planets in Cancer. So of course he identifies with elements of Cancer, but we just get a much deeper read because we're looking at the whole picture and then all the other planets. The real key with Vedic astrology is the 2 systems that it pulls in that aren't in Western astrology. One being the nakshatra system. Nakshatras are constellations that sit within the signs. So we can drill down to what kind of Leo are you? Are you in the first section, the middle section, the last section? There's 3 different flavors there, so we can get a really deep read on not just the whole patch of sky. Leo is essentially an energetic impact in the sky, a space, which all of them are, a 30-degree patch that has, a changing flavor. Again, nature's not uniform, so each patch of the sky has a different flavor to it, which is how we get the rashis or the signs. And then within that, we can drill down deeper. So the nakshatra system gives a really refined another layer of information to Jyotish. And then the dasha system, which is really important, really shows the flavor of planetary energy that's impacting you at different points in time. So where your moon is placed when you're born, which constellation, which nakshatra within the sign starts a cascade of planetary energy. So for example, each planet will kind of have an energy that dominates for a certain period of time. So each planet has a natural period that it's influencing for. Sun is 6 years, Moon is 10 years, Venus is 20 years. So they have different periods of time. So I remember my mum always said to me, you had colic for 6 months and you just didn't sleep. For 6 months. And it didn't go down well. They were driving me in the car and look, if they'd had just a little bit more information, they probably could have resolved it for quite quickly. But she always said 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. So then when I kind of could look up my dashas, what energies were kind of there, I was born into the last section of Ketu. And Rahu and Ketu are the north and south nodes. So they're at the eclipse points. You'll hear them called the nodes in Western astrology, but they're shadow planets. So they're not planets themselves, but they're really kind of an area of the sky where there's this impact. So they have quite a karmic impact and very profound impact in life. And so I was born into a Ketu period, but just the last 6 months of it. So literally, as I came out of that, the colic shifted off. Where my Ketu is placed in my chart is in a house which can be associated with digestive issues. So now there's high values of that Ketu, which is profound spiritual insight. Not going to be accessing that at 0 to 6 months old, although who knows what I was experiencing at the time, because hugely energetically sensitive. So I remember a lot of what I was experiencing energetically in the environment from even in the crib. I've kind of been able to recall that, but that was the source of that, the ultimate source of that colic. And if we go further back, it's karmic before that. So understanding, for me, the key and why I think astrology is so useful, yes, to understand yourself, that's already fascinating. We're all kind of self-obsessed and we want to know a little bit more about ourselves.
Why am I the way that I am?
Great.
But understanding the major flavors of influence can be very settling and also allow you to tap into the high value of it, to understand that. And it's kind of, the more I learn about it and the more I experience it for myself, it's wild to me that people don't know what that energy is for them.
It's amazing. And I think one thing that I've really benefited from is that when you understand like the dasha that you're going through, the time period that you're going through, it depersonalizes some of the ways that you're feeling. Like if you're like, I am feeling like this last sort of week and a bit, I'm like, I am feeling crazy. Like I don't feel myself. I feel like a crazy person. And then you like, when you understand what's going on, you're like, oh, got it. So, but I think like for people that are listening, there's a lot of detail.
Yes.
Like it's very finely detailed. This is not going to be 50 words in the back of a newspaper for, what your Leo self is going to be experiencing.
Expect something coming up
that week. And I just think like, just for listeners, just like hang in there. Don't try and understand everything.
Yes.
Just try and understand like the value of what this can give you. And there are, people like you, there are Jyotishis where you can have your chart read. And so you can understand all of this. But like, it's just so exciting because there are so many layers to it. Anyway, Sorry, I jumped
No,
right
go,
in.
go.
I jumped in. Okay, I'll just take this one.
Yep,
Okay, great.
Go for it.
How did you first come to be interacting with Vedic astrology in your own life?
Yeah, I'd heard about it through obviously practicing Vedic meditation. I think I had a reading before I even became a teacher, and it was just profound right off the bat. I was like, whoa, they're like, yeah, you've got 5 of the indicators for divorce, They sort of said, oh, so single, married, where are you at, when they already kind of had the sense that, probably. It's like, oh, I'm divorced. And they're like, yeah, well, it's good that that's out of the way. And
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
then if you had said, I'm married, they would have been like, you've got divorce coming.
they
Or
wouldn't
they-
say
or
that,
but
but
they would know.
There's a strong, let's say, potential, very strong in the chart. Now, I asked them at one point, because I had, gone back later, and I was like, so what would you have told me if I was, 22 showing up here? Like, you're not going to tell a 22-year-old you're just stronger, because you just like, I was interested in the, the integrity of it, because there's a responsibility there about, creating things in people's minds. And this, very importantly, is the science of light. It should only bring light, it should only shed light, it should only create light. And something that I'm quite passionate about, and why I studied it myself, is I just found that it can get dogmatic in the way that, it's done sometimes, is very much, it doesn't do what it's meant to, is meant to bring light. So anyway, he had said, oh, I would have said to you, you'll probably get married after the age of 36, and just to, be very, discerning. And now, of course, that's all great advice. And he's like, and you wouldn't have listened anyway. And it's like, okay. I would have been too young to take that on. But I think you only really come to have your reading at a time that's relevant. You hear about the knowledge, you become aware of it, you feel that desire, that inner pull, like, oh, this has something for me at the right relevant time in life. So I wasn't obviously ready for anything earlier than that. And ultimately, it's a spiritual science. So it's about, understanding that deeper value of life, and you need to have a certain level of maturity, to be interested in that, and also, be like, well, just when am I going to get the house and the money and the partner, and sometimes, the answer is like, let go a little bit more, or, something a little bit more deeper is there about, your overall evolution. So I found that fascinating. I found it at the time very kind of relieving that, like, there was sort of a karmic element to the way that needed to play out. And it has been very evolutionary in my life. And there's been the sense of, I did the white picket fence life, and then it's like I had to kind of experience that in order to be beyond it and not be sort of seeking it out so much in the next phase, because the next phase was really going to be about something quite different. So that was kind of the start. And at the time I was still, asking about relationships, and, I was being told, this is a very good time for you to focus on your spiritual expansion.
Let's just move on from that for the time there.
Basically, it is not going to be the time where you, which I was kind of like, but, it all unfolded that way anyway. So
That is so fascinating. And do you still have other people read into your chart, or is that something that you do for yourself now? Because, sometimes it can be hard to be subjective when it's
totally.
you.
I think if I've got deeper questions that I'm not getting answers to, it's quite rare. I mean, I think before studying it, I would probably annually have my chart read, because I'll just start to a new flavor of, before I could, read as much as I can now, I'd be like, the energy has shifted dramatically. Everything was just flowing, and I just felt like I was, on fire, and now it just feels like nothing's happening. And I was just like, something is, and then, I'd speak to my astrologer at the time, and he'd be like, oh yeah, you exactly the week that you described this change, you've gone from X to Y, from Jupiter to Saturn. So very different energies. And I think that also, as you're talking about, Hannah, the depersonalization is really important, because it's like, okay, so what we tend to do is go, I'm doing something wrong. Why is everything dried up?
All
why
consuming.
Is this, why has this happened? We start to question that. And it's not about depersonalizing to the point where we don't take responsibility, but it's also we're overly taking responsibility rather than, okay, so if this is the flavor of the time, surrendering into that, and then what's the high value use of this time, rather than decrying it and wanting it to be where it was before, but rather, nature's intelligence organizing something here. So what's the need of the time, and how can you best kind of use it or offset the energy if it's causing some kind of negative effect? So
I just had this pop into my mind about how, like, you know, whenever it's Mercury retrograde, it's all over Instagram and everyone's freaking out.
I know, and it's become, I mean, to be honest, there is a little bit more technological.
Mass panic, it's Mercury retrograde.
But the idea is knowledge, right? So knowledge is power. So if you have that knowledge, then maybe you will back up. You know, the idea is not to just go blind through the time, but back up the systems, recognize, like for me, if I'm traveling at that time, I'll build a bit of fat in the schedule because they're just higher potential for delays. It's just the nature of the energy. But it's not then to blame everything in life on Mercury retrograde, because also on the deeper value, it's a time to kind of reflect, look back. It causes things to slow down so that you can actually land some of the things that, you know, have been building or shifting or changing. And so that's a higher value use of the time to see what actually is coming up for you. Now, the classic is, you know, the ex-boyfriends or the ex-partners start reaching out and DMing and all of this during the retrograde. It's because the high value purpose is not to be like, yeah, I need to get back into that. You know, it's actually, if it's coming up for you, there's some kind of processing to take place, some kind of reflection to be offered. And of course, instead of doing that, often we'll go to the impulsive, like, well, I'll just text and I'll reach out, you know, whereas if you're aware that that energy is there, higher tendency that I might be thinking about, you know, my exes, for example. Depends on the placement, but this is just a classic kind of Mercury retrograde. People, you know, often come back into your life, you know. And so being very conscious about have they actually changed? Is there something here to genuinely explore? Or is this more about, you know, probably more likely more about me, you know, releasing something, some layer of emotion that was there, or a deeper realization about that so that I don't then repeat that pattern, something like that, you know. So being mature as well about the knowledge. The person giving it being mature, the person receiving it having that maturity. You know, we can joke about these things, but like,
yes, it can be difficult to be mature.
But also,
we do our best.
You know,
Do we? Sometimes not for fun.
No,
you know?
no.
Sometimes we do it for the pod. Well, I mean, like, I obviously really into this stuff, but sometimes if I talk about, you know, if I know what's kind of going on, and then, you know how you see a pattern in other people, and like people are also going through kind of the stage and experiencing these feelings, and then if I talked about the planets or something, you see this glaze come over people's eyes, and you're like, okay, we'll just pull back. We'll just we'll just leave the planets aside.
read
And
the
I'm
room.
like, yes, there must be a lot going on at work. Yes, that's it. But you know, a lot of people think astrology is just like fluff and fatalistic. So how do you explain the value of astrology to those people, or do you even bother?
I wouldn't bother explaining anything to anyone that they don't want to know about. You know, there's this law of nature, which is, you know, only responding where there's worthy inquiry. So if someone is asking, then, and they're showing interest, which will be very clear. And if they're not, it'll also be very clear.
Don't push it.
You know, the proselytizing that we've seen with certain, you know, perhaps religious groups, they go around and they, you know, forcing their, you know, their understanding on others. It's never been received well.
So you're not going to people's doors and be like, listen.
No door knocking. But
I read your chart. Here's what you need to know.
in a practical sense, you know, just you could share something, you know, if you're wanting to talk to a friend or a partner about it, you could say, like, you know, it's been really interesting for me realizing this and this and this kind of connection. You say one thing and then you see what is the response. If it's, you know, glazing over or some kind of denigration of it, there's no worthy inquiry there. Not only is there no inquiry, it's certainly not worthy. And so you just, you know, leave it until such time as there is. And then you just be comfortable with the benefit that you're gaining. I think it's the value is something that has to be discovered for yourself. And when you start to feel that, then, you know, that's where it's, you know, meant to duly sit. But also I think it's just been a result of a lot of this sort of dilution of the knowledge, not enough understanding, not enough of the depth of what's available. It's a really deep science that was born out of a result of the yogis and rishis in very, very high states of consciousness, able to deeply observe the planets and the patterns in nature and come up with this absolutely brilliantly accurate, just plays out every time. It's really interesting on teacher training, looking at charts of Hitler, of Donald Trump, of Angelina Jolie, you know, and look at their dashas and like at what time. I often will look at kind of people online and they, you know, you can tell what dasha they're in. They're like, you know, it's all Jupiter, everything's flowing very easily. And I'm like, yeah, that's, going to happen for a period of time and then it's going to shift,
Enjoy that.
Like people who are online who are like, I've got the secret to life, you can make money from home and, live a life of freedom, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, you might be in a dasher where that's the flow of energy for you at the time, but that's not going to be the case for all of the people that you work with. And so it's that kind of understanding of like, where is it really at for you? And also, what's the timeline of these things so it can really maximize a period and then let it go at the time rather than trying to overextend, particularly, let's say, fruitful on the external plane, because that's what most people are interested in, is how is it all playing out on the external plane. Let go of that in favor of the next period, which might be much more about an internal exploration, maturation, expansion. And if we, that takes, again, that little bit of maturity of like, I am interested in my conscious expansion. I, recognize that's of value and just as important as what I'm delivering or, pulling out on the external plane. So having that understanding as well and seeing that play out in your own life or in others' lives. And we just have this sense, and when you have your chart read, it's kind of all the readings that, I've been doing, people just consistently like, I can't believe, that timing lines up with this and this and this, and very interesting.
That's it's so interesting. And I guess like Hannah, you're talking about people kind of being like, yeah, it's the planets, whatever. Like when I'm really into health and wellness, and I have now learnt with like more of a higher state of consciousness, I think, that it actually doesn't matter in terms of like converting other people to what you think about something, because the amount of times that I have said to family members or friends, I'm like, I listen to this podcast and I can already before I have said anything, I can sense an eye roll, and so I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to keep it to myself, I'm just going to learn this and I'm going to practice it myself and I'm going to feel the benefit, and that is enough. I don't have to convert everyone to what I think is right.
And it's so much more effective when you are radiating this deep sense of surety and knowingness in what you're doing and who you are, and you're just radiating that, and you're, if in this case, radiating health, and looking glowing and happy. People eventually, if they don't feel that way themselves, they're going to start asking. They will ask at some point. Now, that point could be very far away, but it's that if you haven't ruined the opening
if you haven't
in
banged
the lead up, they're far more likely to eventually kind of quietly come and say, hey, Matty, I haven't been feeling that good. I was just, have you got something you could recommend? You look, something, how have you been able to deal with all these things that have happened in your life, and kind of, you seem to sail through it, and I really could. There'll be that opening will come, the genuine inquiry, and that's when the flow is open for that knowledge exchange, and for it to be elevating rather than cause a lack of unity when you try and force or share. You don't need to when you know that it works and it's working for you. There's really you don't even feel. You get excited, and that initial passion is like,
everyone must know,
but the ones that are ready, that, are genuinely interested, they will find you, they'll find you through some, means or other.
Okay, so say you're interested in getting a chart done for somebody else. Like, is this prying into something we shouldn't have access to because it's quite personal? Because sometimes, particularly for me, there's a real temptation to like wrangle a birth time out of someone that like, I might be dating. Like, just to pluck an example out of the ether. One, how do you get the birth time out of them? And two, should that be done with permission?
No. Always with permission. So, never. The only time you can get a chart read for someone else is if it's your child, because the purpose of that is for you as a parent to guide them, and you are their guide, for a period of time. So, partners, potential partners, all of that, you do want to, ask for permission.
Have you ever checked out a chart of anyone that you have dated?
I have, but with their permission. I did meet one person who... he, on the apps, they'll say, oh, you're a Gemini, you're a Cancer. He's like, oh, we must be similar, because I'm a Cancer and you're a Gemini. I was like,
no.
I'm in, you don't have to go. Use the Vedic system.
That's your son, I've got a moon thing
and he's like, oh, well, when's your birthday? I said, the date. And he was like, oh, me too. And I was like, really? And then I'm starting to, of course, in my mind, calculate. I was like, this is fascinating. And then he's like, yeah, my mum said I was born at about this time. And I was like, that's the same time, different cities, but same date, same age, obviously.
Wow.
Adult or not. So we have the same chart unless, with a refined birth time, because of course mother's memory is it's not the most accurate. Lot going on in that time, but very similar charts. Now, the way that the energy expresses is very different. Because he was like, "Oh, we're twins, well, what's happening in our chart? What's happening in our chart now?
What's happening for us this week?"
But probably, another interesting piece is it's the soul who activates that chart. So the way that it can express is, dependent on what is the level of the soul and what is it wanting to bring through in this life. So he's not a spiritual teacher. He's a real estate agent. But,
couldn't be more different.
Yeah. But, I came up through sales and I was in insurance. So there was a period of time where my chart was kind of expressing in that way as well. But, Gemini rising is friendly, because he was like, and I thought I was Cancer, right? And I was like, yeah, but it's not a very Cancerian field. Cancers are more nurturing, they're more, much more of a gentle energy that like kind of, being at home. They tend to be more like in healthcare, hospitality, those kind of things, like real estate. You could, depending on, some of the other planets. But he's like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot more sense, So that I did look at. It was pretty fascinating. So I was like, of course I got home and I was like,
we must deep dive.
Someone with the same chart is
must.
actually fascinating. But that's
You've
when
got
you
permission.
really see, the soul expressing the energy. There's a range of potentialities, but there's certain things that will, there'll be a sensitive nervous system, there'll be a smaller frame, the Gemini rising, there'll be, and then the other planets that sit there give these certain other capabilities that are there. So, we obviously spark quite well because there's a lot of unity in the chart.
It's
almost too
incredible.
much, I think. Yeah.
But so then you can look at, okay, what dashas you're in. Can you see what sort of life events might be coming up at certain times?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of, I didn't go too deep into
Come on.
I didn't, because, I've like, I just,
would
I know, but I'm not.
I would have buried myself in it, to be honest.
Absolutely. Face
I've
first.
got enough understanding from my own chart of like the flavour of the time and things like that. But still, the way it expresses, you've got to be in the moment feeling that, and yeah.
And so, getting readings done for your children.
Yes.
Would you recommend getting charts done for your children? Like, how would that help to make choices about how we parent in them individually?
It's so fascinating reading the child's chart, and it can be so useful to understand the child a little bit more. So, there's certain energies that might be there where this is a child that has, let's say, a lot of Mars energy at a particular point in time. They're going to need a healthy outlet for positive risk taking. If they're not getting that, say this is a boy and there's some other girls in the family and they're kind of all being parented in the same way, or they're constantly being told no, don't do that, and they're not really getting anywhere where they can go out, and they need to expel that Mars, or else they're going to cause conflict and inner frustration is going to arise. So understanding that as a parent, like, oh, this is kind of showing up, you'll know already because you've already been witnessing the dynamics. It's not like I can tell you anything about your child that you don't already know, but there's something about hearing it from an external source where it's an independent understanding that I often find for women it strengthens their own intuition, where they may have been saying to their partner, well, I'm really feeling like with this child we need to do something different, or this child really needs this, and then no, and we can't be etc. A response might be there, or they might be receptive, but it's just another layer of confirmation, and perhaps allows them to lean more into that intuitive impulse and then follow it and understand maybe a few ways that are going to be supportive. So that's one example. Or very sensitive child. Now you'll already be aware of that as a parent.
Yes, we now know this very well because I actually recently got Alex and Frankie's charts done with Georgia.
And Frankie was
well,
sensitive.
Alex, actually, Georgia, you can explain what we discovered because, and like you said, my intuition was onto it. I know how sensitive and empathetic he is. Like it's intense, but then we realize like, oh, this is so much more. So much more.
Yeah. So, is it okay to share a little bit about
I think
Alex's
this is fine.
chart? Yeah. So he is a Gemini rising, which is one of the most sensitive nervous systems. So Gemini will always have to balance their nervous system. I felt very empathetic when I read his chart because being that way myself, if my parents had this knowledge, if I'd known that, my sister's very robust and I was very, very sensitive, and it ended up being that I got very shut down, depressed for a long time because I couldn't handle the amount of energy. Now I know the amount of energy that I was taking on, and my system needed to be very settled, and that was not the environment, obviously, that I was born into.
Knowing your family.
There was, a fair amount of, conflict going on, lots of energy in the home. So the beautiful thing for him is that he is getting this support because Hannah's already tapped in like that, but then she's had that impulse to get his chart read. And when we looked at it, I was like, look, he's double Gemini. His moon is also there, which makes him double Gemini. So very, very sensitive, very receptive, very perceptive. It's not about that sensitivity being a weakness. It's about when that's stable, he can really access his higher capabilities, which is obviously where I've got to in my life just very late down the track, is understanding if I look after my nervous system first, then everything else flows. And that is absolutely critical for a Gemini rising. It will just not work if you go down because you can be mentally very strong. It's a very intellectual sign. So you can push forward mentally, but your whole system will start, the whole nervous system will start breaking down. I mean, I got cancer, sensitive nervous system, so I needed it to pay a lot of attention to my health, a lot of nervous system strengthening. But once you do that, then you can really flourish it's the most intuitive sign with moon there on the rising. Incredible amount of intuition available, incredible amount of emotional, energetic awareness. And that can really, for what I do is very, very useful. Now I'm really tapping into, the higher values of that, which continue to unfold over time. So with Alex having that double Gemini, he's very absorptive. Moon is absorptive. Gemini itself is absorptive. So he will take on everything in the environment. So he needs to understand kind of gaining. We talked about, talking with him about gaining a little bit more awareness about, what his system is like, and we can teach him, I'll come and teach him later this year some practices that he can use to kind of just energetically clear, like little kind of movements that he can do, easy breath work and things like that.
How useful
it's life-changing
for a child to have that.
It's life-changing. And understanding for him, because you can start to think that there's something wrong with you, particularly in a male physiology, something wrong with you because he's not going to be the sports captain. Just absolutely not. He's far more of an intellectual, Gemini's a very intellectual sign. He's going to be very creative. He's got a phenomenal chart. What he creates in this world will be very powerful. But if he's trying to be the captain of the rugby team, or someone feels that, he's not that way inclined. He hasn't got the physiology for it. It's like there's a range of potentialities. And this is where people are like, well, you can be whatever you want. Well, there's limits to that. Look at me. I'm not going to be a sumo wrestler. There's just no way. I could train for the next 10 years and do that for 14 hours a day, and there's no way I'll be able to do it. And not only that, I'm just completely out of alignment with what my natural gifts and abilities are. So it's about being able to, and even if you weren't to have a conversation with the child, say they're 3 or 4 or 5, you can then be open and receptive when they start maybe going down the path where their natural gifts and abilities are going to lead, and encourage that and also support. So those kind of things I just feel are I get kind of excited about it and feel even a little bit emotional about it, because I think the trajectory of that child's path at such a young age is entirely different with them without that knowledge.
Yeah. It was so amazing. And then, I told you afterwards I was able to open up some conversations with him, because I've always been aware that the world can be a lot for him. He really needs to, when he gets home from school, he really needs to just like decompress. And I was talking to him in the car about, how he feels a lot from other people around him. And he goes, it's like as soon as I look at someone, it's like a tube goes from their brain straight into my brain.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it's like he feels everything.
Wow.
And he's like, and I always know if someone's on drugs or like something's not right.
I've got that too, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I was able to go, oh, well, what do you need to recharge? Because that can be that can be a lot. And he goes, I just need isolation. I need to be by myself. I need to be quiet. And because I was thinking, he gets home from school and he just wants to kind of shut down a bit and sit with the cats and just chill out. And I'm thinking,
should we be talking?
Should we be doing something? Let's get the bikes out. He's
Your
having
picture is like,
yeah, I
let's
know.
go.
Let's
Your
go.
fire sign.
Yeah, it's a bit of a boring life. I'm not giving him enough entertainment and activities and stuff. And then I was like, actually, this allows me to let go of that, thinking this is what a child needs, to going, this is what Alex needs, because he's just received all of this noise and energy from the world around him. He actually just needs to recharge. And so then we were able to have a conversation about what do you need to recharge and how do you do it and what helps, and maybe we can do this. And so that then I can arrange his time and his environment to support him more.
That is so incredible for a child to first of all have that sort of self-awareness, and then to have the support of actually, what do I need? And for him to be able to answer that question, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. He says some incredible things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great, because then it allows me to let go of what I think he should need or want, and actually tap into what does he really need and want, and how as a parent can I support him and give him tools.
Yeah. And who is he as a unique sovereign being, like a unique soul that's come in, and obviously chosen a quite conscious mother, so that this conversation he already knew. On a soul level, his child was going to be read at this age. He's going to get this information, this support. He's lined that up for himself from that higher level. So that's not random either, But he's a profound little being.
Yeah.
Wow.
The other conversation we were able to have, which was really cool, was that because of that, and because the world can feel like a lot, it can just feel like a lot. Like it can feel intense and sometimes wounding, because the rest of the world is harder and harsher than he is. But I was able to explain that sensitivity that he has is his gift.
Yeah.
That's what he's here to use in the world, to be the person that he's going to be, to fulfill the purpose that he's got, and to express himself and to bring his unique gifts into the world. And to say, while it can feel like a lot, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that we need to manage things to support you so that you can use that gift with whatever you choose
100%,
to do.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
So
I can't
cool.
wait to get the children done. And I guess then, because sometimes I find that because my older two are quite different, and I find that I try and parent Milo sometimes in a way that is a little bit authoritative, because but he doesn't respond well to it. But then it's I feel like I'm being permissive.
Yeah.
Then if I try and just be like, it's okay. But it's this constant inner kind of conflict of being I know that he's going to respond better to this, but it feels like it is permissive and differing to what I should be doing compared to society's parenting standards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think to be able to have a chart that is no, you're right. This is the right path to parent this child.
Yeah.
And you have permission to do that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not just this is how I feel. It's okay, this is how I feel. And now I have the confidence and the permission to really.
And I know why.
Yeah,
And
lean in.
also here are some other useful suggestions of ways that you can, work with that.
Yeah.
And then what's their dasha? What's the major period of planetary influence for them right now? And what, could you encourage in that time? They might be in a very creative dasha where you want to make sure that they've got creative outlet and really, being able to express that energy, because you may not be so creative yourself, and so then you've got this very creative child, and so you're going to want to, or there's a time where they, you really need to focus on grounding for them, and maybe they're already showing up as, sense of overwhelm or anxiety, and here are some ways to, work with that.
It's so exciting.
It's
isn't
so
it?
exciting.
Yeah. And also, it's very easy in our family. Frankie is incredibly artistic and creative, and she always has been. And it's very easy to just focus on that part of her and support that. But also, you were Alex is incredibly creative and
intellectual and brilliant. Yeah, brilliant
so,
intellectually.
And he's been talking recently about how he wants to learn animation. and now I'm like, I've got to get on and actually do something to support the things that he's like got a natural inclination to want to try and be curious about, to make sure that I'm supporting that, because that's how he wants to express.
Yeah.
So I like what you say about it gives you confidence. It gives you confidence in your parenting and confidence in your intuition as a parent to be like, no, I can block out the noise of what how Instagram says I should parent a child, and go, this is how I parent this child.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So powerful.
So powerful, so exciting. So I want to talk about like compatibility with partners. Now, obviously, Matty and I are committed podcast partners in life, and you've had both our charts. And so we thought it would be fun to have a wee look at
So excited.
what showed up in our charts and how it shows that we, work together, or what's popped up for
How
us.
are we
What
so
do
compatible?
Tell us about ourselves.
Well, let's talk about Maddie a little bit, since she
Yes.
knows zero about her chart.
Absolutely
I
zero.
can't wait to hear this.
I bet it's going to say not a natural athlete. Everything always says not a natural athlete. All right.
It does say that. No, you're a Cancer rising. So,
Okay.
you bring, but there's a couple of planets there on the rising. So Cancer rising, is a starting point. Very nurturing, a lot of emotional intelligence available to you. Show up as, very warm, empathetic, friendly, open, energy. And
Nice.
so
I'll take that.
that is very beautiful. That very, and also natural mother, natural sign of the mother, very devoted, effortless devotion to children, etc. comes through with that. But Jupiter is there on the rising. So Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, which means it's in its strongest position. So Jupiter gives you this capacity there. It's kind of the sense of things do flow quite effortlessly and naturally to you. And you're also a very naturally optimistic person, very grounded. When I looked at this chart, I thought, if they'd said to me, at the bachelor time, here are all the charts, I'd be like, this is the one, like, without even looking at the others.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
there
this
she
is the
is.
one that's going to, quote unquote, win it. Though I don't like using that term because, it's just now at this
But I
point.
did win, Georgia.
You did
I
win.
think we can, yeah.
And you know
yeah.
what? There you go.
Yeah,
you are
we
a
keep
winner.
winning every
Take
day.
it. Yeah, take that one.
Here you go up.
So it gives you a natural flow of kind of higher wisdom there as well. And then Ketu is also there. So Ketu is that south node that we talked about. It's a very deeply spiritualizing force. You're actually, quite an old soul with a lot of, spiritual wisdom just naturally available to you. Just this inner sense of knowing and a natural pull and inclination in that direction. It gives you a huge amount of energetic intelligence. You're very emotionally and energetically aware, and you can really feel a lot of fine, subtle vibrations. Without the Jupiter there, you could be very sensitive. The Jupiter is very stabilizing. It's the most stabilizing for Cancer and for the moon. So that's why you are quite, generally on the whole, mentally stable, grounded. Even on the show, which I did watch back in the day, love The Batch.
Big Batch
You
fans
were
over here.
one of the most grounded there, and I think that was one of the things Art was very attracted to. You very kind of just, you probably felt nervous on the show to a degree, but you're also quite able to just kind of stay in yourself and stay grounded because of this placement. Ketu also gives you this kind of mystical magnetism, you've got this outward Jupiterian capacity to hold space and an energy that kind of fills up a room, but you've also got this mystical aura that's kind of people a little bit like, I just want to know a little bit more about it. But you can see that, right?
100%. Like, it's so cool hearing it, because I'm
Yeah.
like, this is exactly the experience that we
Yeah.
had. Yeah.
And so you're not often aware.
That's a good one. I
This
like
is
that.
good.
Okay, yeah. I'm into
You're
it.
often not aware yourself so much of exactly how they express. So it's really interesting to have Hannah here as well, who's like, so that's your rising. The moon is in Scorpio. So there's a lot of water
I thought
here.
there was a bit of Scorpio in there.
See that?
Yeah, I had a
You had an
feeling.
inkling.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of water. Scorpio's a water sign, but has a little bit of fire to it. So both Cancer and Scorpio tend to close up and hold emotions in a little bit. So the one tendency for you would be to make sure you're not getting to that point where emotions are building up, because you can come out with a little bit of a stinger. It's going to take a while for you because much more balance from the Jupiter on the rising, but moon is sensitive in Scorpio. So if that Jupiter wasn't there, you could be quite very anxious. There's a little bit of tendency to kind of overthink things, dig down. Your Scorpio wants to dig down. You also like to research and kind of go deep into topics. But Jupiter is also aspecting. So it's aspecting the sign where the moon is from the rising. So there's a lot of that balancing, grounding effect of that exalted, very strong Jupiter on the moon. So it's offsetting a lot of that. But the natural tendency is there. Moon's in 5th house, which is a house of creativity, writing, all of those things. So you have a natural capacity on that level, very intuitive. You operate from a almost entirely intuitive place. Now you might have felt at times that you don't have as much of the intellectual knowledge. You haven't studied. It's not that you don't have the intellectual capacity, but you may not have studied all the things. But you bring this really beautiful. Your gift is bringing that intuitive and emotional intelligence. That's what you bring even to this podcast. That is the flavor where you come from, and that's a really beautiful expression. It's so interesting, and often very deep, interesting insights will come from you just spontaneously readily available. You're not someone who is going to want to do all the hours of prep. You prefer to just operate from that emotional space, emotionally intelligent,
which suits us very well.
Yeah, and Hannah's kind of happy to do that kind of more structured thing. So there's a lot more I could share. Obviously, we could talk for a good hour and a half. So.
But maybe listeners
get a longer sesh. Get a longer
sesh.
Betty's got a mystical aura.
She's magnetic, we know.
So that's a little bit about you. Where you two sit is, Hannah, your rising sign is Scorpio. So you've got this kind of inner Scorpio on your side, Matty, with the outer Scorpio on Hannah's side. So Hannah also has Jupiter on the ascendant, but Jupiter in retrograde. So it shows up as a little bit more unconventional Jupiter, the knowledge, the way you approach things is a little bit more unconventional, but also that same energy to fill up a room. Both of you get on a podcast. There's a lot of energy there,
The whole room's full.
And very able to hold space for the chat, for the client, for the person that's speaking. Moon in Sagittarius for you, which is ruled by Jupiter. So a little bit more fire there, and a lot of capacity with structure and things that Jupiter will have, but also very spiritually inclined. And Ketu is there with the moon. So there's a lot of this synchronicity between Ketu, the moon, and Jupiter going on in your chart. And of course, Ketu being that intuition, again, you also operate from a very intuitive place, but you can really go with the structure, which also has to do with your exalted sun, but that's another.
Structured and spiritual. That is seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is, down to a T,
Yeah.
right? And both of you have quite a lot of energy in the 6th house of this real drive to serve and uplift others and to support them, those that are struggling, particularly mentally. I mean, this is what this whole podcast is about. So it's very fun to see.
It's amazing how
it is.
Yeah,
because it's stuff that we know, but you can't really articulate it until you hear it through someone else.
And
don't you think?
people ask how we make it work the way that we make it work. Like they're like, what's the magic sauce? But the magic sauce is it's all in the charts.
Yeah, it is.
And you can't design that. It's just there, and it always was right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning,
when we met at the traffic light.
When we were both awkwardly, we hadn't met before, and we were both awkwardly so I had arrived at the cafe, and Bean was on the other side of the road waiting to cross, and we both had to just stand there for quite some time, looking at each other, and then I was sort of looking around because I was like, well, I'm looking at her too much now, so now I'll have to,
you know when you've seen someone that you're meeting and you don't know when
at what point do you acknowledge,
and hi, and the traffic light, it was the longest traffic light I've ever
awkwardly
waited. Oh no! But as soon as we sat down and started talking, it was there. Instant chemistry.
Fireworks.
Oh, now we know why.
Now we know why.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But can we talk about gemstones? Now,
yes.
This is a remedy that you recommend.
Yeah.
And frankly, say no more. I think I might be diamonds.
What is she?
Oh, yes. Let's look at what your aligned stone is. Firstly, why?
Yes. Go back. Explain why.
Explain why. Let's not get superficial here. Right.
I mean, they're very pretty. The use of gemstones is as old as time. Kings, queens, where were they wearing them? Around the crown chakra, energetically around here with usually a big stone right there
yeah.
on the, index finger, which is a Jupiter finger. So you would often see, because that's not a finger that we tend to use that much, the index finger, but you'll see pictures of kings and queens will have, often the stone there. So in India, that knowledge has been maintained that the stones carry certain energy that aligns with different planets. So Mercury, energy is drawn into an emerald. Jupiter energy is drawn into a yellow sapphire. Mars energy is drawn into a red coral. Moon energy is drawn into a pearl. Sun energy is drawn into a ruby. Venus energy is drawn into diamond, for example. So they attract and hold that energy when they're set for astrological purposes. When we're actually harnessing and using that energy, we keep the back of the stone open so that the sunlight hits the stone, and then that stone is able to hold and channel that energy and put it into the system, energetic system, and it's worn on a specific finger for a specific planet, because our fingers are also aligned with the planets, the stars. There's a whole map of the nakshatras on the palm of the hand. Very fascinating stuff.
That's incredible.
So the use of it's really old. Every culture has used gemstones. That's why they've been so prized, they've been fought over, they're extremely valuable. But we have lost in the West a lot of the understanding of the deeper purpose. So when it comes to the chart, there is certain houses that we want to enhance, which are called the Dharma houses, the houses of kind of natural flow in life and what you're creating in the world. There's houses we don't want to amplify, houses of challenge, houses of, potential for illness or things like that. There's going to be a little bit more transformation required there. We wouldn't want to add to the energy of those houses. So sometimes people are wearing stone that's not aligned for them. This whole diamond thing is a De Beers, creation. It's like the get engaged, spend a lot of money on a diamond. Now, many women are like, we like this, I'm happy to have a lovely diamond as an engagement ring. However, that stone may not be aligned for you. So as we come into this age where we've got a lot more of this deeper wisdom coming through, and people are naturally finding this fascination. Why? Because there's just a growing consciousness around the purpose and value of wisdom that's always been there. It's thousands and thousands of years old. The stones are still there. They're still being produced by nature. They absorb a lot of energy as they take all that time to transform into that very hard stone. And it's why the rarer ones, the harder ones that take more time to develop, are more valuable, your diamond, your emerald, your yellow sapphire, than say peridot or something like that. So that knowledge has always been there. We've lost it a little bit. And so I think now, those that are getting engaged or wanting to wear jewelry, they may want to wear something that's actually benefiting, that's, enhancing a house that needs a little bit more support. Is a very important house for them. Or particularly the planet that rules their rising sign. We want that first house of the rising to be very strong. It's like the engine of the chart. Because what you deliver in life is only going to be up to the capacity of what you are. If your first house is weak and you can't really access a lot of the energy in the other houses because that first house is not that strong, the natural things we're going to want to strengthen that. Now, there are ways we can do it. There's other things. Obviously, gemstones only one aspect. Different mantras we can use to really give more effortless access to an energy. So you're not feeling, you two have a lot of Jupiter there, a lot of optimism and things, but say your Jupiter's not that strong in your chart and you don't feel that access to that natural sense of abundance and optimism and sort of space holding, then we can give you a mantra to work with to kind of pull more of that in if it's, aligned for you. And certain, if we need to strengthen a planet that's in a house or associated with a house that we wouldn't want to use a gemstone for, we use other remedies like mantra or specific breath practices that can really help enliven that particular energy and other lifestyle recommendations. But gemstones are fun. And so those 159 houses, again, I recommend if you're interested in this particularly, or say you're getting engaged, you're like, oh, I need to know my stone now, or, you're having a wedding anniversary or something, or, someone's asking about your 30th gift or whatever it's going to be, then I do free gemstone consults where we can just jump on and look at your chart, because there's a number of things that we look at, factors there, those houses, which is the strongest of the three that doesn't need support, which one does, all of those things. So don't go Googling your chart because there's a lot of very low-grade information online about astrology in general, Jyotish in general. It's not the elevating version. And for something, important like that, we'd want to get, a proper recommendation.
It's my wedding anniversary tomorrow.
Yeah, well, just
Someone
FYI.
right.
Here we go.
I can feel that Maddie is desperate to know what the stones are that she should be wearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a yellow sapphire for you.
Oh, same for me.
Hey, we got the same.
Yes.
Well, we know what to get each other. Well, it's our anniversary
It's
today.
it's our anniversary
It's our
today.
podcast anniversary today.
Our
well,
2-year podcast anniversary.
congratulations.
Thank you. We're still very
We
happy.
should have got each other
A yellow sapphire. Oh no, we need a big one.
Yeah.
We do need
yeah,
a big
we do.
one, yeah.
Okay, well, let's get it for our 3rd anniversary. Then we've got time to sort that out.
Okay.
I love it.
Oh, that is so.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Georgia, there is so much,
so much.
that I want to cover that we don't have time for. But how do people
How?
where do I even start? Like, how do people get in touch with you to do their own astrology chart? Where do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, connect with me on Instagram at GV Meditation, and my astrology website is GV Astrology, and there's a lot more information there as well if you want to kind of dive through and have a look. And obviously bookings happen through there as well.
Amazing. Oh, I will definitely be booking in with you very soon.
Get yourself done.
the whole
get the kids
family.
done.
So-
Get your art done.
It's going to have to be a whole afternoon where
I'll look forward
I'm
to it.
booking
I
you
love
out for the day, Georgia.
day
We've got
aside.
things to cover.
Oh, amazing, Georgia! Thank you so much for coming back. That is just so fascinating.
My
so
pleasure.
fascinating
It
and
was so fun to
really
talk about.
fun. Yeah. And
Loved it.
yes, I'm sure you're going to be flooded with requests for getting charts done.
And happy podcast anniversary.
Thank you.
Multi-award winning podcast.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you so
Congrats,
much.
honestly, amazing work that you're both doing and sharing knowledge. And I know that where that comes from, as we've seen in your charts,
And now we
it's
know
from a
how
very
we got
pure
here.
place of that desire to really share and uplift and support. So it's very beautiful.
Oh, it always feels like a privilege.
It really does, doesn't it? That we get to do this for work. You
I know.
Feel very lucky. It's very cool.
And now we'll get to do it with yellow sapphires on our
dripping in yellow
dripping
sapphires.
in yellow sapphires. Might need to get a little more sponsorship first.
Yeah, well, we need crowns, quite frankly. We need crowns.
A few more awards, let's see. Let's see. Oh, Georgia, thank you so
Pleasure.
much. And people get in touch with Georgia and get those charts done for your kids. I think like that's been huge for me, like just such a revelation. Like it's always nice to hear about yourself, but
Yes.
to have that, confidence in how you parent your kids and just know what they need and also how they get there also depersonalizes some of their behaviors.
Yes, exactly. And what energy they're kind of having to deal with at the time, like understanding that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you
You're
so
amazing, Georgia.
much.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you next time for our annual podcast we seem to do.
For more spiritual guidance, tune in.